I was the director of Camden Regional Legal Services, which was a very large legal services program that had a very strong law reform perspective. We were doing a lot of housing work, both with regard to legislation, for tenant legislation. We had formed an alliance with the various tenant organizations throughout the state. And we were doing the legal work associated with a lot of the legislation that was passed supporting tenancies. We also were doing a lot of work in the city of Camden, challenging urban renewal programs, highway construction, and the like. And that spawned, ultimately, the Mount Laurel effort, which was to try and take the work we were doing in Camden into the suburbs and to see if there was a way to break open the suburban kind of lock against low and moderate income housing. The Mount Laurel case had essentially gone to the Supreme Court, having been argued pretty much at the time that the public advocate was created. I resigned as the director in Camden, just serendipitously at the time the public advocate was created. I was just tired doing administrative work and wanted to just exclusively do litigation. On our board in Camden was Judy Yaskin, who was the assistant public defender or deputy public defender under Stanley Van Ness. She got my letter of resignation. She called me up and asked if I would be interested in moving to a new department that was being created in the state. She insisted that I go up, that I should meet with Art Penn, who had been chosen by Stanley to run the civil litigation arm of the Public Advocate's Office, which was the Division of Public Interest Advocacy. When I went up there, I brought a portfolio I was very intrigued by Art Penn and Judy. They assured me that this guy who was head of the department was extremely, had a high degree of integrity, intended to go forward with the department in a very aggressive way, and would be very easy to work with. What I did is I took the kind of portfolio of stuff we were doing in Camden, I gave it to Art and Judy, and I said, look, read through this and tell me, is there anything here that if it fit into the public advocate's litigation portfolio would be rejected by Stanley Van Ness? I just wanted to know what were the lines going to be? And they came back and they said nothing. All this stuff was, not like he understood everything we were doing, but on the surface it would be fine, and that I should be encouraged to think that we'd be able to continue this work. Well, one of the bottom line questions was whether the public advocate was going to take over the Mount Laurel litigation, because I was doing that litigation in Camden. They told me that they would be willing to take over the litigation, which was, to me, an enormous boon to the litigation. Now it was going to be the public advocate representing the low and moderate income clients that we had and supporting this effort. After the Mount Laurel decision came down, the first one, Supreme Court decision, there was a real substantial question of implementation and how it was going to be implemented. One thing we did in the Public Advocate's Office, because we were representing now the plaintiffs, we were involved in the trial, the referral back to the trial court to implement the Mount Laurel decision. And we were involved in every matter that we could find in the state of New Jersey where people were trying to implement the decision. There were developers, there was other public interest groups that were active. This is when I first had a lot of interactions with Stanley, which I hadn't had before other than when he hired me. And his position was to be basically as aggressive as we thought was necessary. And this became extremely critical when we decided to do something incredibly aggressive in the latter part, in the late 70s. What was happening basically was that the Mount Laurel implementation was going nowhere. It was all this petty litigation going on over every single issue in that decision. I mean, there's no reason to go into the weeds about that, but let's say we felt that we were losing momentum and that we needed to do something that was going to bring this case and this issue of discrimination in housing in the suburbs to the forefront again and make it clear to the state that it was not going to be going away. So we made the decision to sue every municipality in the wealthiest county in the state, which was Morris County. And that was a bombshell when the public advocate sued 27 municipalities in Morris County, all challenging all of their lack of compliance with the Mount Laurel decision. It was a huge splash in the water politically. And however he did it, and I have no idea, Stanley just handled it all. And we somehow survived as a department and were able to do that work. And I believe that that is what resulted ultimately in the Supreme Court again taking the case. Now, of course, I have no way of knowing that, but it was a clear statement that this was going to be in the court system for a long time unless the Supreme Court gave sufficient guidance as to how it would be implemented, how the first decision should be implemented.